I'll try to keep this short. Persona, one of Atlus's pillars alongside with SMT. I feel like it's no argument to say that Persona is now a very well-known series as well as an influential one. As I'm sure after the successful release of Persona 5, most people are aware of the name Persona. But I want to take it back to a time when Persona wasn't as big of a name as it used to be, and when people weren't annoyed as seeing anything related to Persona 5. All the way back to 2014, where it's been a year since Atlus teased that they were working on a new mainline Persona game, as well as during a time where I'm sure people were tired of seeing anything Persona 4 related. That cycle just never ends. Back to a time when mainline Persona games were still considered as PlayStation exclusive games and not available on any other platforms. In 2014, Atlus dropped a Persona spin-off game on a platform that I'm sure most people on said platform probably had no idea what the fuck Persona was, and a game that I'm not sure many people played. That game being Persona Q. Persona Q is a spin-off game that's completely different from the other Persona 4 spin-offs that came before it, and even the ones that came after. As this one in particular was a first-person dungeon crawler, just like Atlus's other series, Etrian Odyssey. You could even go so far as to say that this was more so an Etrian Odyssey spin-off than a Persona spin-off, because they were completely the same by the way they played. Oh, and it was also developed by the same team that made Etrian Odyssey, so there's that. But aside from it sort of exploring a different genre, it also did something that I'm sure no one expected, and that's being a crossover with the characters of both Persona 3 and Persona 4. But it didn't include FemC from Persona 3 Fez, so there's that. Even though Theodore is in the game. But let's just ignore that, just like how Atlus loves to ignore her. But even though the game is the same as Etrian Odyssey, it still does keep that Persona vibe, but to a lesser extent. I won't get into it now, of course, as I'll save that for when we actually get into the game, so to move things along, and as per usual, let's get into how this game got made in the first place and its reception upon release. After the release of Persona 4 Arena, the fighting game released for the Xbox 360 and PS3, the producer for the Persona series, Katsura Hashino, was interested in other spin-offs or collaborations. It was this and the desire from Persona fans to see the series come to the 3DS that led to Katsura going to Daisuke Kaneda, someone who used to work on the Persona games who then became director of the Etrian Odyssey series. Since Daisuke used to be a part of the Persona team, he of course took the challenge of making a Persona game on the 3DS. He then got Azusa Akido, who has been a writer for the Persona series since Persona 3, to write the main scenario for the game. So with all these people who are well versed with the Persona franchise, they started tackling how they would adapt the series in a handheld system that wasn't as strong as the PS2 or PS Vita. There's an interview with Katsura saying that the way they went into developing this game was having a festive collaboration mindset. Bit of a tangent here, but I think this comment sort of explains why the game takes place in a culture festival, or at least it might have had some influence on the story setting. Though I might be reading a bit too into this, and it was just something that Azusa just thought up, since during the development of this game was also around the series' 25th anniversary. But back to the development. They were having issues with trying to find a balance with the aspects of both series while also staying true to Persona. They began with wanting to make the dungeon exploration similar to the Persona games where you're exploring in a 3D environment, but they then decided to change it to how it is now, with it being in first person. There were also elements of combat from both games that they needed to consider. One big thing from Persona, or even just Shin Megami Tensei in general, was the one more action where if you were to hit an enemy's weakness, then you'll get an extra turn. Etrian Odyssey, though, they don't have this, so to compromise for both parties and to make things easier, they ended up making the boost system. Then on Etrian Odyssey's side, they have a subclass system, which Persona doesn't have. So they worked around it and made sub-personas a thing. I'll delve more into both of these later when I get into the game, but once things were sorted out, they were able to progress more smoothly. Though before I move on into its reveal, I just wanted to share some of the early designs and ideas for the game. Again, like last time, I won't be showing everything, but if you do want to see more, then everything used for this video will be in the description. Though for the interviews, those are in Japanese, so you'll probably need some translation tool for that. But when it comes to the early designs for the characters, they originally were going to make them more detailed, as you can see from the textures of a few of them. If I were to put my input, I do think making the clothing look simplistic instead of having a lot of folds and creases does make it look better. As if you look at the early Chie design, there's something that just doesn't make it look right. Though for the detail on their faces and eyes, I do think they could have stuck with the detailed versions. I personally like it, and I think it would still work with the chibi-like aesthetic, as even Nindroids keep these sort of details. Aside from the early model designs, we also get to see early designs of the all-out attack portraits and the menu hub. From the early menu hub, you can see that they tried to use the characters' PS2 models early on before switching to using the chibi models. It's either that or it was just used to plan things out. Again, these are the only things I'm going to show, as you can look at the other things that they cut or changed from the website in the description. Oh, I also wanted to mention this Dancing Aegis test video that was found in the game. I just wanted to share this because I thought it was cute, and also, I don't know why nobody has used this in the meme or something. I mean, we have the dancing chibi Naoto from BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle, but not this? Very upsetting, but I do like Naoto, so it gets a pass.
I've been waiting for this!
But it's finally time to move on to the game's reveal. It'd be in November 2013 where Atlus will reveal the Persona Q to the public alongside other Persona spin-offs, and a teaser for Persona 5, that being the oh-so infamous chairs. If you were a Persona fan during this time and saw this reveal, my condolences. But after its reveal, there's not much to note aside from Atlus then uploading their announcement trailer for the game on the Japanese website Nico Nico Doga, which is just like YouTube but with a few differences. Though I can't find the exact trailers since I wouldn't know exactly how to begin searching for it on the website, and from what I know, the website tends to have lost the media, so it could have been deleted. Though someone did manage to upload it on YouTube, so there's that at least. Or at least I think it is that trailer. But the game did eventually come out in Japan first on June 5th, 2014. Though, as it is the standard among buying physical games now, Japan has some pre-order bonuses depending on where you bought the game. I won't go through all of them, but a few of them are some stickers to put on your 3DS, some keychains, a tapestry, and a Japan classic, a good amount of different clear files. Don't even begin to ask me why Japan loves to have clear files as merch. I don't understand it. But one actually cool thing that they got as a pre-order bonus was a soundtrack CD with some of the game's music and some arrangements that are exclusive to the CD. Now, aside from the game itself, another thing that Atlus released was a limited edition Persona Q 3DS XL. I feel like there's no argument to say that this 3DS looks really fucking good. It doesn't lean towards one game's visual design or even tries to lean into Q's themes, but instead encapsulates one of the series' most crucial aspects, and that's the Velvet Room. It has that cool blue color with some checkered patterns. The top plate of the 3DS makes it look like the compendium, which, although it being placed like that isn't practical since you aren't meant to look at the 3DS like a book, they at least went the creative route. Then on the bottom of the 3DS, it has all the P3 and P4 cast along with Zen and Rei in the middle, sort of like they're linking the cast together. Overall, it has a design that isn't tacky or forced. Instead, it goes for a design that says, hey, if you're a Persona fan, then you know. I really like this 3DS, and I would have loved to have owned one, but getting it today is pretty pricey. Oh, in Japan, getting the limited edition 3DS would have also come with a copy of the game. Now, months prior to the game's release in Japan, in February of that year, Atlus announced that the game would be released in the West later that year. You have to remember that this was a time where most Japanese games would take a long time to release in the West. Although it still happens today, I think it's a bit better now. But for us in the US, it came out on November 25th with the other regions days apart. Now, we didn't get the same variety of pre-order bonuses like in Japan, but we did get an option to get a special edition. What came in it was a themed 3DS XL case, a small art book, a soundtrack which I don't think is the same as the one in Japan, and finally a tarot card set. Though you could have also gotten the tarot card in the standard version of the game, so you wouldn't have missed out on it. Other than the game, the West did indeed get the limited edition 3DS, though the only difference was that it didn't come with the game. Now as for how the game was received, It got pretty good scores all around from reviewers, with this being a spin-off, though of course fans of the Persona and SMT series might have some differing opinions, which is to be expected. As for the sales for the game, it was able to get a total of around 760k sales across all regions, though this info comes from VG charts, and it's hard to say if this info is true or not, as other sites say 255k sales, but I'm going to roll with VGCs. I will say though that me bringing up the sales doesn't really matter for this video, but it is sort of good to have this in mind for when I ever do end up making a video for its sequel in the future. Basically, you gotta let me cook with this. But yeah, that's really all of the outside info that I have to bring up about this game. I mean, sure, there's a short dual manga series that shows both of the game's protagonists' perspectives, which will make sense when we get into the game, but that's just a footnote to add, and is not that important. So now that I got all of that out of the way, I think it's time to actually start getting into the game. So let's begin the story recap section and retrospective of Persona Q Shadows of the Labyrinth.
How we make each other on this wild and crazy carousel of life. Any cool how it changed the path of our lives, set us off a new adventure. This carousel takes us round and round. This labyrinth of life, you can't tell up from down. So much fun. We forgot to check when this crossroads taking us. But hey, here we come. This carousel spins us round so much. Sometimes you don't know should you stay or get off. It's only just begun. Welcome to this wide maze of life.
What an interesting opening. So, if you've played a Persona game before, then you should know that the openings sometimes have subtle hints of the game's story, which this of course also does. Then in the starting menu, we see two brand new characters that I'll get into later in the game. Finally, once we press something and get into the menu, a clock tower takes the main center of the screen. I wonder if all these things will be important later. I'll just say to keep these things in mind as we progress through the story. They will be in the test. When we start a new game, we'll be presented with an option that has minor significance. That option being whether you want to start the game with a cast of Persona 4s or Persona 3s. The choice doesn't really matter in the long run as not much changes in the overall story. The obvious difference with choosing either is that the protagonist you start with will be your silent protag while the other will have voice acting. Then of course there's the party that you start off with, and the starting dungeon story beats will play out a bit differently, but eventually you get the other cast and the story will play out just the same for both sides. Though I will note that there is a slight difference with how the story reveals one of its twists, with whose side you choose, with one being slightly revealed more earlier than the other, as well as which character the story focuses on. And the story themes kind of parallel which side you choose with their respective games, so there's that as well. Getting back to which cast Retrospective will be playing in my original playthrough of this game back in 2014, I played the Persona 4 cast side. So for this video, I decided to play the P3 side, just so I get a different experience. So after putting in the protag's name, I begin the game. Now if you played Persona before, then you probably know how the game always shows a butterfly in the beginning, which is sort of supposed to symbolize your eventual change as a person. Of course, it has more meaning than that in the overall series, but generally that's its symbolism. But in this game, you can see that it's stuck on a spider's web, which could mean one's resistant to change or halt of changing. It will mean more later in the game, so again, keep this in mind. The game then transitions into a flash forward with the protag and Elizabeth. By the way, I'm going to be calling him Makoto from now on sometimes, as that's his canonical name. But due to Igor not being present, she recalls a vague memory that also makes Makoto begin to remember someone's voice. Geez, I wonder who they could be referring to, as the game then prompts you to name the P4 protag, Yu Narukami, or Naruka, as there aren't enough characters to fit his whole name. Elizabeth begins to wonder why this thought suddenly appeared and starts retelling the events of that day at the typhoon. By the way, I should mention when this game takes place for each side. As mentioned, the P3 side happens during September during the typhoon, where I think the game automatically skips some days. I don't know, never played Persona 3. Then for the P4 side, it takes place in October during the Culture Festival. Anyways, not to get too sidetracked, the cast are at the entrance of Tartarus and are waiting for Makoto to get out of the Velvet Room. With each character that speaks, the game does a decent summary of the characters and their personalities. Their conversation then gets interrupted by a strange sudden sound of bells ringing. Fuka then checks to see if anything has changed when she gets startled by a random spider, which seems insignificant at first, but best to keep in mind. Then it cuts to Makoto in the Velvet Room where Igor is nowhere to be seen, just Elizabeth. She says she can take over for Igor in performing fusions, but she can only make legions. As she mentions this though, a mysterious man with a Velvet Room attire shows up out of nowhere and calls out Elizabeth on her lie. She introduces him and shares that his name is Theodore, but she calls him Theo for short, and that he's her younger brother. When I first played this game, I had a bit of knowledge of Persona 3, so when Theodore was introduced, I was completely confused. I only knew of Elizabeth and thought that Theodore was possibly a character that shows up later in the game, but as I know now, and I'm sure you do as well, he's actually the Velvet Room attendant for the female protagonist in Persona 3 Portable. His inclusion in this game must have been really odd for Persona fans that played this game when it came out, as they added him, but not FemC. Though the reason is kind of obvious as to why they didn't add her, since if she was included, then it would have been really weird to have 3 protagonists that you can choose to start the game off with. Also, it probably would have been more work that they would have had to do, since they'd have to write 3 slightly different scenarios for the 3 paths. But regardless, it's weird to include Theo, but not FemC. Back to the story, Theo explains that he's there to make sure nothing bad happens, as if Igor is ever to not be around, then the Velvet Room could become unstable. Then suddenly an alarm goes off, which I didn't think there were alarms in the Velvet Room, aside from the one in Persona 5. The lights go off for a second, and once they turn on again, the rest of the P3 cast appear out of nowhere. The gang are understandably confused and begin asking questions on where they are and why they were summoned. Both Elizabeth and Theo explain where they are, but are also confused as to why they're in the Velvet Room. That's when the elevator they're in stops moving.
It stopped. Hey, it reminds me of a roller coaster. The way it keeps climbing until it stops all of a sudden.
Shut up! If that were true, it would drop! Ah!
We are currently descending in an uncontrolled freefall. We're indeed falling.
Are we going to crash? Into what? I don't know. The bottom?
Yakisoba! Come and get your yakisoba!
Come on over! We've got a fresh batch of takoyaki! We're having a concert in the music room. Come see us.
Where are we?
They appear to suddenly be in the culture festival of another school, though it doesn't take much to realize if you played Persona 4 to know that the school that they ended up in is Yasugami High. But of course our party doesn't know that. But although the location is Yasugami High, there's a question to be asked. Are they still in their time, or are they in 2011, the same year as Persona 4 takes place? Mitsuru begins questioning Elizabeth as to whether or not she brought them there, but she's also as confused as they are. Makoto and Elizabeth go back into the Velvet Room and see that the interior has completely changed. There's also 2 doors inside that are covered with 4 locks. With not much to go on for now, they go back out and see what everyone else has gathered. They also aren't able to gather much info as the people in the festival act like NPCs and the only info they get is that they're in Yasugami High. They also find out that trying to leave the school only leads them back inside, meaning they're stuck there for now. While everyone begins dreading being stuck in this place forever, Elizabeth chimes in saying that they might have been brought here for a reason and resolving it will bring them back. Theo further explains that the area they're in is similar to Tartarus, and with that they begin looking for anywhere where there's readings of shadows. They eventually find themselves in front of an attraction named In Wonderland, which, if you can't obviously tell, it's supposed to be you in the shoes of Alice in Alice in Wonderland. But as they're prepping to go in, they get stopped by someone.
Don't go inside. There are monsters in there.
Who are you two?
The edgy-looking guy shares that his name is Zen, and the girl is Ray. Surprised that there's someone willing to talk to them, the group starts asking questions, but they both sound unsure with their answers. They then reveal that they both got their memories taken by someone, but they know that they want to get out of the school. The others conclude that the person who stole Zen and Ray's memories must also be responsible for keeping them all in the school. Zen then mentions that he feels lured in by the Labyrinths and asks if Ray and him can join them. Although he's able to fight shadows, he himself isn't a persona wielder and Ray isn't capable of combat. She instead shows off one of her quirks, that being she's a foodie. I swear this has some importance. But with introductions out of the way, they go into the labyrinth to further investigate what's going on. Before we actually enter the labyrinth, we can see a bit of the available menus, but we haven't unlocked everything yet, so I'll hold off on that. For now, I'll just mention a bit on party formations and stuff. So normally in Persona, you're only available to 4 party members including the pro tag, so only 3 can be swapped. In Persona Q, however, you're allowed up to 5 party members including the pro tag, and there's a front row and a back row to consider when placing/adding your party. If you've played any JRPGs or RPGs that have this sort of formation system, then you'll know that you want your physical fighters in the front row, while magic users in the back. When selecting a character you want to add, the game does break down the character and their abilities, as well as recommending their placement, so it won't be overbearing to those who are unfamiliar. Though I will say that you should be very mindful of who exactly you'll want to be in your party, because in this game, your backup party members will not receive any XP. You do eventually get accessories that will give XP to those who aren't in the party, but that'll be pretty pricey and you get these accessories almost halfway through the game. So to reiterate, think carefully on who you want in your party because you'll most likely be sticking with them for the long run. Inside In Wonderland, the place does indeed have that weird fantasy look to it like in the book. After taking a couple steps in the labyrinth, we get into our first encounter. Now, for the most part, those who have played SMT or Persona should not have much issue with how combat works. You have your standard attacks, your magic skills that use SP, the physical skills that use HP, but other than that, a few things have been changed and added for this game. For starters, one classic mechanic in every SMT game, the one more, isn't in this game, or at least it works differently. While you do get rewarded for hitting an enemy's weakness, like you normally would, instead of getting another chance to attack again, that character gets to act first and is able to use any skills with 0 cost. This is the boost mechanic. Now an enemy can get rid of that character's boost by hitting them before the end of the turn. This works as a suitable replacement for the one more system that works within the Etrian Odyssey combat. One mechanic that's been added to this game is the leader skills. In this game, your navigators can help you out in battles with supporting abilities that they have. Fuka, in this case, has an ability that can give you a slight healing for 3 turns. Now, the way to use these leader skills is by using combat points. I'm not going to be using the acronyms for it for obvious reasons. The way you get combat points is by attacking the enemies, and you get rewarded more for hitting their weakness. You can see how much you have by the meter on the right, and be sure to have it filled because it's useful to have it ready for any situation. And that's pretty much all I have to say for the combat. I mean, of course, there are some other things that I can mention, like the certain skills that they added, but I feel like it's a bit unnecessary to add since you can experience that for yourself if you decide to play the game. Outside of combat, there are some things I should explain, but I'll hold that off for a bit. They continue to explore a bit more until they decide to head back to gather themselves. Upon leaving, Fuka reports that through the door they stumbled across, there was a strong shadow behind it. Mitsuru then suggests that if they're to progress through the dungeon, then they should stock up on some equipment. But seeing as they're in the culture festival, equipment doesn't seem easy to come across. That's when Rei gets reminded of a place and leads them to the workshop, but the weapons are just toys. That's when Theo steps up and volunteers to be the one to craft the equipment, as long as we give him the materials that are dropped by the shadows. Oh, and he gets a very suitable outfit for his job from Elizabeth. Poor man just gets bullied by his sister. She then leads the group to the nurse's office, where she will be the one to mend our wounds and replenish our stamina. Once everything is set up, we finally head back into the dungeon as we're fully prepared this time. Back in the labyrinth, Zen gives us a notebook so that we can jot down a map and keep track of where we are. Then Fuka brings up the presence of strong shadows and warns us to avoid them at all costs. She then adds that since they're stronger than normal shadows, that they should have their own names. Zen suggests, Physis Oikein Eidolon, which I had no idea what the fuck this was supposed to mean or if it was a real word, but it's actually Greek for natural resident phantom, or something like that. But that's too long, so they call them FOEs for short. It then cuts to a spider crawling down someone's arm, with that someone saying that time finally resumes. Emphasis on time there. After this cutscene though, you're free to explore at your leisure, so now I think I should explain how exploring works. So, if you played an Etrian Odyssey game before, then you pretty much know how it works. But if you were like me and had no idea how it worked, then it works roughly similar to dungeon exploration in old SMT games, where you're exploring the dungeon in first person, but instead of blindly walking around, you're able to draw your own map on the bottom screen. Sort of akin to how people used to jot down maps for games back then. But of course, the game does give you some indication on where you are and the walls around to help you detail the map. It also gives you a lot of icons so that your map can be very detailed. Like, you could put down icons for doors, staircases, treasure boxes, shortcuts, and symbols that can be used to indicate important spots. You also have a brush that you can use if you want to change the color of a tile to warn you about a certain spot. Basically, the map will be your best friend in this game, and you'll constantly be looking at it and jotting things down as you progress. Or you can use the auto map to help fill in the walls for you. Now for encounters, it's obviously not like Persona where you're able to see the shadows in the overworld and attack them to get an advantage. No, instead enemies pop up as random encounters, and you can tell when you're about to get into one through the little icon on the bottom right of the top screen, with it turning red when you're about to get into combat. I'm usually pretty tolerant of random encounters in JRPGs if they aren't as intrusive, but in most cases I would prefer if there weren't any. This game though, that isn't the case, as the encounter rate can get pretty frustrating the longer you explore a dungeon. It doesn't help if you're trying to solve a puzzle and you just get bombarded with shadows every couple of steps. This is doubly true if you're trying to get away from FOE, because for every turn that passes during combat, FOEs will take one step. So you want to end that fight really quickly before the FOE gets to you. Since I'm bringing up FOEs, I should probably talk about them. Again, if you played Etrian Odyssey, then they work just the same, but for those who don't know what they are, they're incredibly strong and are not meant to be taken on in the beginning. Certain FOEs have different behaviors, with most of them usually chasing you, but in most cases, they typically don't react to you and follow a certain path unless you walk in their line of sight, then yeah, they'll hunt you down. Aside from the enemies, I guess I should mention that while exploring the dungeon, you'll stumble across certain events. Some of them are simply just a conversation / banter between the party members, events that recover health or give you items, while others start side quests. I feel like that pretty much sums up everything that's important to know. Now, before I continue on with the story, I want to first explain how I'll be going over it. That's because most of the cutscenes while exploring don't have much importance, as they're mostly just comedic scenes for the most part. I mean, there are some that do have some importance to the story, or at least add to it, but in most cases, they don't. So for that reason, I'll just be going over the important cutscenes. Other than the cutscenes though, I'll probably chime in talking about the labyrinths themselves and like some things I just want to point out. Moving back to the story, Mitsuru figures that the deeper they go, the more dangerous things will get. At the same time though, we sort of see a bit of Zen and Rei's relationship, and from it we can sort of assume what it'll end up becoming at the end. Not only that, but as everyone is ensuring Zen and Rei's escape, we see Mitsuru show her authoritative side and things get kind of awkward. Yukari then points out Zen's lack of a persona, which then leads to questioning why Makoto doesn't have multiple personas. So to figure that out, they decide to head back and ask Elizabeth. Though for some reason this seems to be optional as you're not immediately taken back, but you'll probably be stopped at some point, so it's best to just head back. Once we're back in the Velvet Room, everyone gets the chance to see the doors. Mitsuru then asks Zen and Rei if they know anything about the doors, but they don't. Though Zen assumes that it takes them back to their world as they weren't there before we came. With that out of the way, they move on to the question they came to ask in the first place. Elizabeth does some tarot reading and sees that Makoto doesn't have the Fool Arcana, but instead an upside down tower. She concludes that while he isn't able to wield multiple personas, he is able to wield two at the same time, but he isn't able to replace Orpheus. She does another reading for the rest of the party and pulls the Fool, which she goes on to explain that they too have the same ability to wield a sub-persona. She wonders why this is the case and wonders if there's another person with the wild card there. Gee, I wonder why she would think that. Mitsuru then asks a previous question, that being why Zen and Rei don't have personas but yet are able to attack shadows. Elizabeth concludes that since they resided here, they must have become one with a shadow or persona. Having some of their questions answered, they head back into the dungeon, but before I continue, let me give a brief explanation on sub-personas. So they work how personas would normally work on the protagonist, but you could give one to your party members, but one thing they don't do is change your elemental resistance. They of course do have more of a variety of skills that they can access to, with the right fusions of course. Also, one thing that makes them really beneficial is that each persona has a specific HP and SP count. So when you add them to your character, they stack onto your HP and SP. What also makes it good is that if you use up all the SP and HP in battle that the persona has, then the next time you enter combat, it'll be recharged. Meaning that you should solely focus on using only the persona's SP to conserve yours. This also means that you're incentivized to fuse personas with high HP and SP on top with good skills so that you can conserve as much resources as you can. It's a pretty interesting system to say the least. Then aside from your party members, even navigators can equip sub-personas. Essentially, navigators can get skills that help traverse dungeons, whether that be preventing enemies from getting an advantage, finding a nearby treasure chest, locating shortcuts, and best of all, healing you a small amount of HP for every step you take. So give them good skills and you'll never have to change their sub-personas ever again. Back in the dungeon, the group eventually come across a pink rabbit on the second floor. They're a bit hesitant on approaching it at first, but after affirming that it doesn't seem to be dangerous, and then having a feeling that they remember it from somewhere, they decide to chase after it like in the story. They eventually corner it, or at least they think so, as the rabbit immediately jumps through a painting, losing it, but having a new path open to them, they continue on. So yeah, just gonna explain that this is gonna be the puzzle for this floor and the next, so nothing too challenging yet. The last place we follow the rabbit to on this floor is at the stairs that lead to the next floor, so they continue on to the next floor while also chasing after it. On the next floor, the group have a bit of a chat before continuing. The conversation just boils down to Zen being jealous that Rei is complimenting someone and that Junpei thinks that Rei's cute, and Yukari isn't cute. Yeah, Junpei is a real ladies' man, alright. But Mitsuru eventually does break up the conversation, and that's when Fuka shows up and tells everyone that Elizabeth wants to see them again at the Velvet Room. Mentally preparing for what's to come, they leave and head back to the Velvet Room. Inside, Elizabeth and Theo basically tell us that they're able to do basic fusions for us now, as well as unlocking the compendium. So yeah, even though we unlocked the ability to have sub-personas, we weren't able to do fusions until now. Kinda weird for them to just hold it off till now, but whatever. All that matters now is you're able to do fusions, so make whatever broken persona you want to your leisure and hope you don't get a fusion error. The game also has a Street Pass feature that allows you to buy personas from people that they have uploaded. So you can either get a pretty good persona from someone or one that's just a troll. Oh, I should also mention that you can also, in Atlas fashion, buy DLC personas that are just broken. So that's an option if you just want to plow through the game. Going back to the third floor and traversing through it while slipping past some FOEs, they stumble across the pink rabbit again. Then just like earlier, they chase after it and After going through the painting get jumped through, they come across a door that has a padlock on it. With no other option, they follow the other path, and upon reaching what seems like a dead end, Fuka shows up to tell them that there's a door near them. That's when they notice a very small door with a table next to it, and on it some bottles with "Drink Me" written on it. Fuka wonders if it's the same drink from Alice in Wonderland where it makes you small. I guess then drinks the liquid to check if it's good to drink, and she concludes that it's safe. But nothing changed. They start to wonder if it actually does anything and ask Akihiko and Shinjiro for their opinions. But when it cuts to them, they're having an argument. Mitsuru gives a little exposition about how they were both childhood friends, but as soon as it cuts back to them, their argument gets more heated. To the point where Akihiko drinks the liquid to prove Shinji is a coward, which then leads to Shinji also drinking it. Then this happens.
Oh.
They're like little dollies.
That liquid caused this?
Ha! That doesn't hurt one little bit. Last chance, say you're sorry. Ah, you hit me! Right back at you. Hurry up and say uncle. That's my line, damn it!
That's quite enough.
Hey, let me go! Don't get in the way of men having it out.
Do you want me to freeze you two together permanently?
Let's call it a truce.
Surprised that the drink actually worked, and with 2 bottles left, they start debating who should drink the remaining bottles. Junpei pulls out Hunger Games and volunteers, but we know that he has ulterior motives. That, of course, him wanting atoms to move really fast to the point where it starts a chain reaction of atoms hitting each other until they split to cause a big explosion, enough to the point where it's possibly able to burn the atmosphere. But of course, that's just my game theory. Yukari, of course, rejects the idea of Junpei drinking it. Doesn't want him causing an Oppenheimer. So then it ends up with Yukari and Makoto drinking it. Then, a certain scene just happens.
You guys are so tiny, Senpai.
We're not stuck like this, right? Hey, Koromaru! Not so close! Hold on, Koromaru! Hey, stop licking me! Stop it, Koromaru! Ah! Your tails!
It seems Koromaru-san's feral nature has awakened.
Damn! Everyone, head for that door!
Yeah, the same thing happens in the P4 side, but a bit more tamer. Well, I can't really say that since, for them, they really lean heavily on the Kanji's questionable gayness. As it even has a scene where Yosuke and Kanji have an accidental kissing moment. So there's your yaoi scene. But back to the shrunken P3 members, they find a key that they can only assume it's used for the locked door. They grab it, exit through the small door, and get back to their regular size with the added bonus of them being traumatized by Koromaru's frantic lickings. Going back to the locked door and inserting the key into the padlock, it unlocks and we're able to continue on. Then as per usual, we find the pink rabbit and continue chasing it while slipping past FOEs. We chase it until we finally make it to the final floor, and as soon as it stops running away, giving us the chance to catch up to it, it disappears. So if it's not clear by now, with there being a save point, we're approaching a boss fight. So this is sort of your warning to properly gear up and fuse good personas. That's because this fight's gonna test a bit of your limits. Approaching the door and interacting with it makes Fuka give you a warning that there's a boss. But again, once ready, you go on through. Inside, the boss is revealed to be the Queen of Hearts. No surprise there, and she stands there hugging a chest until she turns around and faces us. She yells that she won't let us have this, which is to say the chest, and goes on saying that she'll never let us escape to school. The group sort of figuring out that the shadow, that being the queen, is keeping them there, and the chest having some importance, they get ready to fight.
Attention, my minions! Deploy the Royal Street Force!
So yeah, this is what I meant that the fight is sort of going to test your limit, because before we actually fight the queen, we first fight her guard soldiers. This phase doesn't really last that long, and what you're supposed to do is simply kill a bunch of them until you trigger a cutscene, or at least lasts a certain number of turns. Though, don't fret, as these guys are pretty easy to defeat as they're weak to every elemental skill and they barely deal any damage to you. So you'll be able to storm through them pretty quick, and all you need to do is just not waste a ton of your SP and you're good. Once triggering the cutscene, the group are beginning to get overwhelmed by the endless card soldiers. Just as they're at their wits' end, a voice calls out to them.
What the? No, really, what?
We'll talk later. We've come to help.
All right, let's do this!
That's right, the investigation team joined the fight and help you get rid of the card soldiers. And yes, if you noticed, they were indeed doing JoJo poses. You then get put back into the fight with your party being replaced, and this time you just have to kill the cards in front of you to progress. One cool thing when they're forcing your party is that the battle theme for their respective games start playing. And it's only played in this fight, and only this fight, so you better savor it. But after eliminating the cards, your party comes back, and this time you actually face the Queen of Hearts. Now this shouldn't be said, but obviously the Queen will pack a bit of a punch, but she isn't strong by herself, so if your party knows any debuffs, then you should go ahead and use them to your advantage. Another thing you should be doing is trying to inflict some ailments on them with one good one coming from Zen, that being Curse. I should also offhandedly mention that yes, you can indeed inflict ailments on bosses, so try to do that when you can. Now you might have heard me say along the lines of she's not weak alone. That's because she can summon 4 of her card soldiers. When this happens, you might start to panic and think that this is a bit much for a first boss, but don't worry, because if you remember from earlier, then you know that these cards are weak as fuck and are weak to every element. Meaning that they're there for your advantage, because you can just hit their weakness and then get a boost to then cast a free skill to do whatever. So there isn't anything to worry about when facing this boss, and you'll eventually beat her. Once the fight is over, both groups have a moment to sort of greet each other. The woman with them, Margaret, best Velvet Room girl of course, as well as Elizabeth, but she introduces herself as being Elizabeth and Theo's older sister. To not get too sidetracked, Zen points his focus on the chest that the Queen has been guarding.
It's a box.
I speculate that the shadow we just defeated was protecting this box. You're opening it?
Yes.
Inside of it is a stuffed bunny with a name tag on it with Nico written on it. And no, not Nico from fucking GTA 4. Now, from what they say, you can sort of guess from context clues, but I'll just explain and say that Nico is of course supposed to be in Japanese and it can be translated to smile. The group wonders why Nico is written, and Ray brings up that it could mean to smile, but then they start wondering if the toy is related to the rabbit they were chasing. Asking Ray and Zen if they know anything, Ray doesn't, but Zen starts remembering that there are 4 labyrinths with guardians protecting something similar to the Queen. He also vaguely remembers that he had a task to do, but he isn't able to remember much past that. They're able to conclude that the things that the Guardians are guarding are the key to unlocking Zen and Ray's memories, as well as their key to escaping. Though they wonder why Zen is able to remember, but not Ray. That's when their conversation is interrupted by the bell ringing. As soon as it stops, Fuka announces to everyone that one of the locks to the doors in the Velvet Room is about to come off, so everyone rushes to see it. Upon exiting the dungeon, both groups take the time to properly introduce themselves first. I'm not going to go over this part, as if you play their respective games, then you pretty much know them well. Margaret then gets everyone back to the main subject on hand, and affirms that the doors in the Velvet Room must be the exit, and also confirms that going through the labyrinths will unlock the doors. With their goals now realized, both parties decide to work together to escape this world, and they go into the Velvet Room to see the lock come off. After witnessing the first lock come off, our attention turns to a person that hasn't been introduced yet. Her name is Marie, and she's also a Velvet Room attendant from Persona 4 Golden. She would definitely be an e-girl or a Tumblr girl if she had access to the internet. Margaret tells us that she'll be able to help us in the Velvet Room, but she also embarrasses her by mentioning her poems, something that Marie constantly denies and instead calls it her pathos. A little bit of a cope there, if you ask me. She then moves on and says that she'll be taking over doing fusions and that she can now do triangle fusions, which just means now that 3 personas can be fused. As for Elizabeth, she'll now have her full focus on the nurse's office. She also mentions that with the free time, she'd like to look into something. Further adding that she'll request us to help her look into it, but she'll of course reward us handsomely for doing so. Essentially what this means is that side quests are now unlocked for us. To get further info, we follow Elizabeth to the nurse's office. Upon entering, we see that the interior has completely changed. And not only that, but Elizabeth has changed her blue outfit for a pink colored one. She talks a bit about her side quests, so let me give a brief explanation as there isn't much to explain. So yeah, they work how most side quests work in other games. You'll have an objective, and once you complete it, you get rewarded with an item and XP. Now, this is the only way, for the most part, how you'll get XP for characters that are not in your party. Though, it won't be enough to where they'll get to be near your main party's level. One other thing that you should pay attention to about these side quests is that some of them will have a time window to them. It's easy to tell which requests have a time limit since they have a clock on them, so do always pay attention. But that pretty much sums it up. Though, I should mention that there are some requests that you should do no matter what, as they'll help you out in the long run. For those quests, I'll be sure to point them out, but soon after Elizabeth briefly explains her request, everyone then decides to have fun at the Culture Festival.
Right on target. Firing! Targets annihilated.
I guess.
Take that, as they say. Oh, what'd you get? Strawberry, mint, chocolate, banana, potato, milk, melon, seaweed, red bean, and smelt! Smelt? Oh, bittersweet! What flavor's yours, researcher?
Doesn't the cold food hurt your internal organs?
Huh? I won't lose! Hey, get me cinnamon, raspberry, and jelly.
I want 10 chocolates!
Will you guys show some restraint? Kanji, will you say
Oh, so fluffy!
Like this, and...
Hey, I got him!
Huh? I got 2 too. Oh, not bad.
I'm sorry.
After the cutscene plays, you pretty much have everything unlocked in the menu, and you can now decide who you'll be using for the rest of the game. Now, I don't think there's necessarily a wrong answer as to who to pick, as I don't think the game is all too difficult to beat, and you also have the sub-personas to sort of help you out. And though that might be the case, there's probably a right answer as to who to pick to storm through the game, as there's even some tier lists as to which party member is good or not, but from my playthrough, my party consisted of Makoto, since you're pretty much forced to use him, Yu, since he's the other protagonist, I wanted to use him, Yukari, as she has more healing options than Yukiko, Zen and Rei, since they're available to almost every elemental skill and have some support skills, and finally, Chie as my heavy hitter due to having power charge. Now, I feel like some people would argue that Aigis is a better physical attacker since she has Orgia mode, which buffs her attacks, but I'm confident with saying that Chie is pretty good to have because not only does she have power charge, but she also has crit eye. This skill raises her chances at getting crits, but there's a slightly better version of this skill that Chie later learns, and that's Mind's Eye, which increases crit chances for everyone in the party. So what you can do is boost your crits, then land one getting a boost, power charging for free, and finally hitting with a strong physical skill. Even though this would require a good amount of SP, with a sub-persona with enough SP, you can potentially be good. And you can see me cook with this skill on my second channel! Yeah, baby! So I have a second channel that's essentially a VOD channel for my Twitch, links for both in the description. And on that channel, I have a playthrough of Persona Q, so you can definitely, again, see me cook with Chie there. Yeah, shameless plug. Ooh. But back to the video. But yeah, make sure you have the party you want, because again, you'll be with this party for the long run. Then after considering that, you now have to consider the navigators. Look, I'll just make this easy for you. Have Rise for exploration and Fuka for battle. You're welcome. After all that though, again, you have unlocked everything. Now let me run down the list on everything. Most of it has already been explained, so this will be kind of fast. Workshop, nurse's office, and velvet room pretty much have been explained, so no further clarification needs to be made. Strolls is new, and what this is basically just a very simplified version of social links, but not really. You get to see some of the characters interact with each other and see what kind of wacky hijinks they get into. They're not necessary to watch aside from a few requests, but other than that, you can skip most of them for the most part, unless you want to see how they interact with each other and get to know every character more. Labyrinth is where you get to pick which dungeon you want to explore. Party, which I'm sure you can guess is where you can change your party, and then save is pretty much self-explanatory. And that's everything. I can finally take these shackles off as there's no more menu or mechanics to explain! For mechanics, you can look into that yourself, cause I'm free! So now, let's move on to the next dungeon. After everyone having a great time relaxing at the festival, Mitsuru brings everyone back to head into the next dungeon, or labyrinth. Fuka finds out that the next one is at the second year's class. Yosuke then brings up that that's his class and dreadfully hopes that their group day cafe display isn't there, which makes Mitsuru and Rei question what exactly a group day cafe is. While they're talking about that, Chie is distracted by the clock tower as she notices that the time on it is still the same. But Zen chimes in by saying that it is moving, but very slowly. Naoto, intrigued by this, decides to check out the clock tower, and upon a closer inspection, they see that there's no way of getting inside of it. She then goes into detail about how, although the clock tower isn't at their school, there was one at one point. And that's when Yukiko recollects that she vaguely remembers that there was one when she was little, though it wasn't as big. Instead, it was a small monument, which leads everyone to assume that they've traveled back in time, though it's hard to say if that is the case since there's shadows around. That's when Chie brings up how they go through the TV to fight shadows, which confuses the P3 gang since their experience is completely different. That's when everyone starts talking about their group's goal. And as always, if you play their games, then you know what their goals are. Finding out that the rules they know in their worlds are different from each other, they throw away all their prior knowledge and proceed forward while learning what they can in this world. With that, they finally head to the entrance in the next labyrinth, which appears to be the group date cafe. But before we go in, they need to establish who will be the overall leader for both groups. Though it doesn't take long for them to decide that Makoto should be the leader, which isn't all too surprising since we're playing as them. As for Yu, he's nominated as the vice leader, so at least he has an important role. It then cuts to the Velvet Room where the siblings are questioning the reason for both groups ending up in this place and the reasoning for this place to be a high school culture festival. Though they ask these questions, they can't seem to be getting any closer to the truth for now, and instead continue to do their duties until all is revealed. Back at the labyrinth, everyone sort of comments on the interior of the place, with Kanji calling it cute. which leads to Yukari commenting on Kanji's said, which then leads them to talking about Kanji's feminine side, because of course they have to. While having that conversation, a voice suddenly interrupts them by welcoming them and telling them that by going through the labyrinth, they'll find out who our destined partner is. After a bit of Rei trying to give a subtle, and I say that loosely, hint to Zen, it cuts to a mysterious figure saying that everyone is assembled and to come to him. Not that type of come. But cutting back to the group, and after a fight, Mitsuru notices that the P4 gang don't use invokers like them. That's when they both talk about the differences in their overall goals, like how getting rid of the Dark Hour will save the world, while stopping the killer will save their town. Although what they're both doing is incredibly helpful, there's some thoughts from Yosuke where what they're doing isn't as important as saving the world. This is emphasized more further in, as when Yukari is looking for something she dropped, she listens into a conversation between Yu and Yosuke where Yosuke sort of questions if his reasons for fighting are as noble as the others. Yu cheers him up for now, and they continue on. They progress forward until they stumble across a unique door, and upon stepping in, they're greeted by the voice. The voice calls this place the Selection Room of Destiny, which is basically like those quizzes online where it matches your answers to a character, but in this, it's to find your ship. This is the main gimmick for this dungeon. You're gonna have to find these doors and give whatever answer. There's no wrong answer unless you're trying to pair with someone specific. Answering these questions will unlock a door that will let you progress further into the dungeon. Now, as somewhat stated, the answers you give will determine who your ship will end up being. Some of the answers sort of point to who they're pointing you towards, but of course, some of them are left vague, so you don't know who you'll end up with. But this first question matters, as choosing one of them will cut out half your options, and not only that, but it will determine if you're homophobic or not. And I guess if you're a lolicon or shotacon, and a furry, I guess. Which I guess is unfortunate that not being homophobic isn't the same option as being a potential shotacon and or lolicon. Also, I'm only saying that because just because of how the question is phrased. I mean, it isn't supposed to be that serious of a question, but I sort of like to believe that it is. It also doesn't help with like the two choices you're given, but I'm just looking at this retrospectively. But yeah, if you choose the their sex matters option, then you'll end up getting paired with a girl. The other option, however, you either end up in a yaoi ship or a shota ship with Ken or a furry ship with Koromaru. Which of course, I'm not homophobic and I'm sure you're not homophobic, so of course we'll pick the it doesn't matter at all choice. Even if it means we'll potentially be a shotacon or a furry. Two of the most terrible things. But you know, that's the risk we take, baby! Oh, and I won't be showing my answers after this point, just so you won't know what choices made me end up with who I got. That way you get to go through it yourself if you ever decide to play this game. So once we pick our choice, we are able to continue along with a locked door and we couldn't go through, being open now. So now that we're in a different labyrinth, I feel like I should talk about the FOEs here. So for all the FOEs here, you'll be wanting to avoid their line of sight. The first one is a golden cupid who will shoot you with arrows that will confuse your movement. It isn't all too bad as your controls are just backwards, your left will be right, your forward will be backwards, and you'll get used to it. The second is a pink cupid who shoots you with attraction arrows, which, as it sounds, will make you become attracted to the cupid and forcibly make you walk towards them. And lastly, there's the white cupid, which doesn't shoot you, but instead it chases after you, but only if you're staring right at them. They're all two pretty easy to slip past for the most part, but they can screw you over if you're in a bad placement. Also, they're mad ugly. After exploring a bit of the second floor and finding a suitable place for a break, Naoto asks Aigis a question she's had since meeting her. Aigis confirms that she is indeed a robot, which gets Naoto excited and then asks if she can touch her. Aigis doesn't mind and further adds that she can also poink her head as well. Everyone seems to know what poinking means, but Rei asks Zen what it means, but you can only assume that it means to make something come out. At least from the context he gets. That leads to Rei pointing out a donut, where you have the option to then ask where she was keeping it. Asking this makes Rei blush while saying that she doesn't keep it in her pocket since she's storing cookies there. Which makes me question, Where did she keep that donut? Also, I'm sure me and many others who've played this game have probably asked, what the fuck does poink mean? Well, looking around to see what others have to say, apparently this is a localization change, as in the original Japanese text, it's purori. It's an onomatopoeia for when something falls, and this corroborates with what Zen says, but if that's the case, then why did Naoto react the way she did when Aigis suggested pointing her? Well, it could be that she doesn't want to take a part of Aigis, but it could also be because purori is a slang term used for when a woman's bra strap slips off. Now, was there any reason for me to explain this? Not really, but I just learned this and I just wanted to share this info. And now you know. Though I still leave with the question of, where exactly did Ray keep those donuts? Once you reach the 3rd floor of the Group Date Cafe, be sure to go back to the nurse's office, as once you get there, you get a cutscene with Elizabeth. She tells you as she was doing her research, she found a spatial void within the velvet room, and reaching into the void, she pulled out a blue orb. She further adds that she found similar readings within the labyrinths, and then asks if we're able to look into it, and grab the orbs while doing so. This unlocks a series of requests, and this is something that you want to do, as doing them rewards you with accessories that give you stat boosts. And they will help you in the long run, as the further you get into this quest, the better they get, which means you just strengthen your party members. So yeah, be sure to do these quests when it's available, as they just require you to go back to the boss area and defeat a golden boss enemy. Later on the 4th floor, the group takes another opportunity to take another break. This is where Yukari comments on how despite the place being called the Group Date Cafe, it doesn't feel like a group date. Because of that comment, Ray asks again what exactly is a group date, to which then Junpei chimes in with his over-exaggerated answer, only for Ray to misunderstand what he meant, to which then he gives her a serious answer. Now understanding what a group date is, she's intrigued on doing it. After a bit of threatening from Zen, Junpei agrees to hold a group date, dragging the P4 girls, Akihiko, Shinjiro, and Makoto along. Junpei gladly shows off his riz, but when it comes to Akihiko, well, he's obviously not good at it. The next thing they decide to do is play a game called Categories, with an added punishment for losing to having to read a poem that Junpei found, which, unbeknownst to them, was written by Murray. Everyone plays along and tries their best not to lose, but it doesn't even take long for Akihiko to just lose.
Here goes. Darkness and a rose. I am a rose, a single rose that blossoms in the moor. A mournful rose whose white petals are matted with blood, blossoming deep crimson. If you wish to pick me, do so. I'll pierce you with my million thorns. I'll drink the blood you've shed and flower wildly in the darkness. Until my last petal burns to ash, I'll bloom all by myself. Roses, white roses, blood black roses. Thank you. Ugh.
And with that, they awkwardly end their group date experience. After a certain point while exploring, be sure to leave the dungeon and head to Elizabeth because now something else has been unlocked. Upon getting to the nurse's office, a cutscene again will play where Elizabeth says that she wants to test your strength. So she's going to start putting up requests for you to fight her, which again unlocks a quest line. And again, be sure to do this when it's available because completing these quests unlocks special personas that you can fuse. And one of them unlocks a pretty good early persona that has a skill called Heroic Gemini that gives you the chance to use whatever attack skill you used again. This is pretty good to use on Chie because after power charging and using a strong physical attack, there's that chance of it activating again and doing more damage. So yeah, this questline is worth doing. But going back to the dungeon, they finally make it to what seems like the final question, and they steel themselves as they're confident that the Guardian is nearby. Answering the question, they're allowed through, and the further they go, they're faced with another question, with the voice revealing that this is, in fact, the final question in the final room. It reviews the questions we've answered thus far, and then finally answering the last question, we're finally presented with who our destined partner is.
Your destined partner is, lo and behold.
I thought so. It might be because we both have the power of the wild card. But I sense something with you too.
We're then dropped into a separate room from the rest of the party, where we're forced to walk down the aisle, where we're presented with a romantic painting. I bet the Fujoshis will love this. They then reach upon a door, and the voice tells us how we'll be able to get married, and with no other option, we open the church door, to which we're greeted with this.
Now, let us pay. Yes!
With the boss appearing before us, the rest of the party luckily come just in time to stop the wedding. With everyone back together, we start the fight with the priest. Now, this fight can get somewhat hectic, as the boss will sometimes put up vows, which prevent you from doing an action. The red coffin means that you can't use any attacks that turn, the green means you can't use any items, blue means no leader skill, and yellow means skills aren't allowed. If you couldn't tell, they're color-coded the same as your actions, just as a heads up. So don't try to break these vows, as you'll get severely punished. But if you manage to avoid all that, then you'll be fine. And after a bit, you'll have defeated him.
Boom! Divorced!
Oh, just as we thought. A chest.
I will open it.
Zen! No! Don't touch that!
Ray then apologizes to Zen for slapping the item off his hand, and upon closer inspection, they find out that the ring is actually a toy ring. They move on to asking Zen if he remembers anything new. He's now only able to remember that he was looking for something because Ray was crying, but that he couldn't find it. Zen also concludes that the ring belongs to Ray, but she somewhat denies it by simply saying she doesn't know. Zen further asks why she told him not to touch it, to which she simply says she doesn't know again, other than she thought he shouldn't. Zen is also able to conclude or remember that the stuffed rabbit also belonged to Ray, and that makes him wonder why Ray's things are being kept locked away. This leads to Ray suddenly bursting out that she hates Zen and doesn't care for him anymore, as well as saying that everything has been his fault. After this sudden awkwardness, Fuka brings the news that the second lock to the door is about to come off, so then the group rushes back to see it. Witnessing the lock come off, they are finally able to confirm that going through the labyrinths are in fact the key to opening the doors. Margaret also adds that the doors do indeed connect to their respective worlds. With them essentially being halfway done, Risi and Fuka already located the third labyrinth, which is a display called the Evil Spirit Club. With some of them dreading going to the next labyrinth, due to the name, they face their fear and head to the next labyrinth. Alright, since we're halfway done with the labyrinths, but not really, I'll put in the spoiler warning. That's because from here on out, or at least once we get to the Guardian, you'll be able to somewhat piece all the clues that the game is slowly drip feeding you. Or at least you'll have some idea of it. So if you haven't played this game yourself or haven't gone through this part yet, here's your warning. Also, I'll just put this in again, but if you want to see me play this game, there's my second channel. Shameless plug, shameless plug. But for those who don't care about spoilers or already know, then let's proceed. Oh, and if you're this far in, then consider leaving a like and subscribing. Really helps the channel. YouTuber mode out of the way now. The group walk up to the next display, and just as they imagined from the name, it's a haunted house. The boys don't seem to mind the theme of the next display, however, the girls have a different reaction because of course they have to. Focusing how well the P4 group get along comments on that, which makes Yukari subtly jealous, or at least get lost in thought. Everyone then hypes themselves up as they're halfway done with the labyrinths, and Zen even assures Ray that he'll protect her even after what she said. It then cuts to Margaret and Marie, where Margaret is checking the cards to figure out what's happening, but she keeps pulling the tower. Marie asking what it means, Margaret explains that one interpretation is collapse, and that the Culture Festival could presumably be the festival that destroys the world, whatever that means. Cutting back in the labyrinth, the girls start freaking out while the boys are just standing there with no problem whatsoever. You know, just some guy things. That's so fucking stupid. They then finally start exploring the dungeon, and upon going through the first door that's in front of them, they immediately see a pile of papers on the floor. Well, they say piece of paper, but it's actually a pile. Getting closer to inspect it, they see what's written on it. It's essentially a clue to get around this floor, which just says that they need to open the doors if they want to continue. So yeah, how this labyrinth will operate is that at some points you'll find notes scattered across which will give you clues on how to open certain locked doors. The last two floors will have you doing different things to sort of spice things up, but for the most part you'll be given certain clues to solve puzzles. At some point as you progress, Junpei will bring up if anyone else heard the sound of a baby crying. The girls get freaked out and berate him for joking, but Zen backs him up and says he also heard it. That's when, after taking a few steps and tripping a rattling noise, the FOE of the area shows up. That being the dead baby. Kinda fucked up, but fitting for the dungeon. So yeah, there'll be some spots where you trip a noise that'll summon the baby and it'll chase after you until you go through a door. So be sure to do that as fast as you can. After this encounter, you get the first clue on the puzzle you have to solve later, but I'm not going to be going over the puzzles as I don't feel like revealing how to solve it, so let's continue. Once finding the puzzle that is the class schedule, and upon solving it, you'll get a key for the practice building, allowing you to open one of the locked doors. Investigating the practice room, you find the north building key where you encounter another FOE. That simply just blocks the door you enter from. Yep, that's all it does. But you'll eventually find the stairs to the next floor, and even though they're descending further into the dungeon, the girls' fears don't go away, and as they're talking about this, Mitsuru abruptly yells at everyone to continue moving. Yukari is visibly bothered by this, but says nothing, though Yu notices. As you continue exploring, you'll find yourself in a dark room. This is the second gimmick of this dungeon. You'll have to navigate through the dark rooms and be trying to find a switch to turn on the lights. Sounds simple at first, but in the dark is where the second FOE will be lurking, as on some tiles, a FOE will be blocking your path. It doesn't do anything to you other than give you a FNAF jump scare, but if you do walk towards them, then yeah, you'll engage in a fight with them. So that's where turning the lights on comes in, as they're afraid of the light and won't show up. Again, sounds pretty straightforward, right? Well, there's another addition, as there will be some locked doors that you need to open, and the key you need to open them can only be picked up in the dark. I'm pretty sure I don't need to explain the rest as to what the puzzle / challenge is. The group didn't take a moment to gather themselves in the darkness, and here, Yukari and Junpei have a conversation about how Mitsuru doesn't seem like herself. But Junpei then points out to her that she's probably the one who's bothered by something. Realizing that's the case, she goes on about how if not just her reason, but if everyone's reason for fighting really is to get rid of the Dark Hour, as she further clarifies that she has more of a personal reason for fighting. That's when Junpei shares that he's fighting for Chidori, a girl that's been referred to by Junpei many times in the game who's important to him. I've said this way earlier, but I've never played Persona 3, but I sort of know who she is, so I won't go too into detail about her, but just know that she's important in that game. But because he's fighting for her in a sort of roundabout way, he's also saving the world. his answer clears her mind and cheers her up, and after that they continue on. They eventually find the switchboard to turn on the lights, but it's missing a part. So after some puzzle solving and grabbing the part, they're able to turn on the lights, which are gonna be used to solve another puzzle. Once all the puzzles in this floor are done, and all the doors are unlocked, they descend to the 3rd floor where the design has completely changed. Where the first 2 floors looked like they were in an abandoned school, the 3rd floor is now an abandoned hospital. The group comments on how creepier the new setting is, and when Rise warns them to not get separated with how dark it is, Yosuke casually drops the fact that she's an idol. Junpei is surprised, but has a vague feeling he's heard her name before. Shinji is able to remember hearing her name from a friend who held a secret show for her at a club. Rise does remember holding a show at the club, but says that she did it over 2 years ago. From this info, they all share what year they think it is. This is where they find out that they're from different times, and they run by this with the Velvet Room attendants who also corroborate this info. Because of this, Mitsuru then wonders if since the P4 group don't know what Dark Hour is, then does that mean they accomplished getting rid of it? The answer is yes, but they don't have time to think of that now, as they have other problems that need solving right now. So they continue along. But first, if you go back to the Velvet Room, then you'll see that you've unlocked the ability to extract skills from personas. How this works is that a persona you have will have one specific skill that you're able to extract into a skill card for a price. But doing so will make the persona that you extracted from be sacrificed, which means on top of that, you'll probably have to buy said persona again. So it's a real money sinker to make your main persona stronger, which is worth it, but with the amount of money it'll cost, this feels more of a late game sort of thing. That, or I guess I'm just very bad at investing money in this game, which, if that's the case, then don't lend me your money or I'll probably fucking waste it. Going back and traversing through the entire 3rd floor, they go down to the 4th floor where Rei is having a harder time staying calm, but Zen asks her to endure it a bit more. Rise then shows up to tell everyone that she's getting a reading of something strong further down and concludes that it's the guardian of this labyrinth, and so they keep on going. Okay, I know I haven't been mentioning the puzzles aside from the one on the 1st floor, but this one I have to talk about. Now, this is the first piece of the puzzle, which doesn't make sense since it's just a bunch of letters. I say the first piece because there's more pieces to find before you get to the solving stage, but I'll mention the second part when we get there. Now, a little bit ahead, you encounter the FOE that blocks the door again. Okay, nothing to note, right? Well, after going through another door again and turning on the lights, the FOE enters the room and starts chasing you. Now, this thing will pursue you no matter what, and I don't know if there's a way to not get into an encounter with it since it's able to move 2 spaces. The only advantage you have of getting further away from it is by moving through tiles that have a light on them since it's unable to move through it. But after chasing you for some time, there is a way to trap it, and that's by blocking it in this little space between 2 light sources. Once you trap it in, you won't have to deal with it ever again. Moving forward, you'll eventually find the second piece of the puzzle, which is just a bunch more letters. Then much later, again, you'll find the third and last piece to the puzzle, which again is just more letters. But once finding it, they can't advance further in the floor as they can't find a way to unlock a door yet. Though they find a set of stairs that takes them back to the 3rd floor, but it takes them to an unexplored area. They then stumble across a door and Yu asks Rise how much they have left to explore. She doesn't answer for a second, but when she does, she says that she's having problems with scanning the next room and that she's also having trouble connecting to them. Taking that as a sign to be cautious, they enter the room where, upon entering it, the ground starts shaking. Rei unsurprisingly gets scared and Zen does his best to calm her down. Mitsuru then tries to call for the navigators, but they get no response, and Rei suggests that they leave the room, but nobody tells me what to do, and plus, you have to do this, so if you take another step in the room, the floor beneath you will crumble and you'll fall straight through, separating you from your team. Though once Makoto gets up, he isn't alone as Rain and Zen are with him. As the 3 of them are assessing the situation, they suddenly hear Junpei's voice behind a door. He tells them that they need help unlocking the door since they can't open it from their side. The 3 of them discover the door uses keycards to unlock it, but searching the room, they aren't able to find any. That's when they come across a door with 2 panels next to it. Makoto and Zen test out the panels by standing on them, and doing so opens the door. They soon figure out that the panels can only be pressed down by heavy objects, which crosses Rei out, which means that she has to go into the dark room and find the keycards herself. Understanding the situation, she steps up and agrees to go. Zen hesitates as he doesn't want to put her in harm's way, but seeing that she's determined to help, even when scared, he lets her go. In this section, what you're to do is help navigate Rei by telling her which way to turn. It's sort of like those ice puzzles where you push an object and it keeps moving until it hits something. The thing stopping Rei in this instance are the walls and the jump scare FOAs. So that's basically the puzzle, and there are some items that you can collect that you should definitely collect. After Rei toughs it out and collects all the keycards, she comes back and is rewarded with a head pat. Though if you pick this option, know that Zen will definitely remember that and he will consider killing you. So be sure to watch your back if you do pick that option. But now that we have the keys, we're finally able to open the doors separating us from the rest of the party. Though, looking inside the room that they were trapped in, we get one final clue to the puzzle that we need to solve, and with this, we go to where a door is locked. Okay, with all the pieces we finally have now, I want to take this moment and get a census on how many of you are able to solve this. So we have these letters in a sort of math equation, and we have to translate this into these 4 rooms. Now, I'll give you a second to solve this. You can also pause the video to try to solve it. Unpause it when you either solve it or are unable to. Well, have you solved it? If you were unable to, don't worry, because I did not understand how to solve it when I first played it, and I totally forgotten how to solve it when replaying it for this video. So what you're supposed to do is take the letters out and be left with this. This might make a bit of sense now, but if not, then let me further explain. The plus and minus signs are supposed to be coordinates in a plane graph, so plus plus will be northeast, and minus minus will be southwest. So you pair the symbols and boom, you will now be able to solve the puzzle. This makes so much sense when you take out the letters, but in the moment, I don't know how you're supposed to realize that you need to take the letters out. Because since they're from A to D, you think the rooms are paired with a letter, but nope, they're just a red herring. This puzzle infuriated me just because it just did not make sense to me how you're supposed to just get all that. But I don't think it's badly implemented, I'm just stupid. But fuck this puzzle, man, it just got to me. And I would just really love to know how many of you actually solved this puzzle without looking anything up. But enough of that, and once going through the door, we get rewarded with a little kanji and Naoto ship moment. So, there you go for those of you who are into the shipping wars. But finally, we make it to the bottom of the labyrinth where Fuka warns us about the guardian up ahead. The girls are mentally preparing themselves for the worst while Teddy is fantasizing about hot nurses being ahead. Yep, he'll be in for a surprise, that's for sure. Stepping through the door, we're greeted by the boss, or I should say, bosses.
Oh, what are you doing here, little children?
It's time to begin your operation!
For this boss, you'll have one main boss and 2 supporting bosses that are pretty much easy to defeat. Now, of course you want to get rid of the nurses, as they'll be a pain if you leave them alive. The caring nurse will provide buffs to the doctor and debuffs to your party, so you'd imagine getting rid of her first, right? Well, while these things aren't good, you'll instead want to focus on the calm nurse first, as she can heal the doctor. But that isn't the only thing she can do, as she can also inflict ailments to your party. So it'd just be best to get rid of her first, and then the caring nurse. When you're done with them, honestly, you're pretty much set, as the doctor just damages you. I mean, he also has a chance of putting you to sleep, and he can potentially deal massive damage to you, but it's just a straightforward fight from here, and you'll beat him in no time.
Another one bites the dust. That must be what the Guardian was protecting. Do we have to?
Inside the chest, they find a locket of hair, and everyone is extremely confused and creeped out at first until Zen describes it as beautiful. Chie and Yukiko begin to describe how well kept it is until Rei then quietly repeats something that Yukiko said. Then the bells start ringing, and as it fades away, Rei starts panicking. She says that she can hear someone calling her and that she doesn't want to go. She continues on saying she'll be good and that she doesn't want anything to do with the hospital or the school anymore. That's when Zen cuts in and reveals that Rei was the one who created the school. Of course, everyone is confused as this came out of nowhere, and Zen continues to explain that she wished for the school to be made. Then he starts to wonder if she's actually trapped here. Naoto then starts trying to deduce the secrets of the school, seeing that if Rei is the one who created it, then she must have been the one to create the Labyrinths and the Guardians. This also makes Mitsuru conclude that there possibly isn't an evil mastermind behind the whole thing, but rather it's Zen and Rei. With Holt still in their theories and there still being one labyrinth left, they leave to see the third lock come off of the Velvet Room. After watching the lock come off, Fuka informs that the final labyrinth is a panel called the Inaba Pride Exhibit. But before everyone heads to the final labyrinth, they decide to split off and take a breather. We follow Yukari for a bit and see her interact with Fuka and Rise. She sees that they're both getting along really well and starts asking about that. Fuka responds saying that even though she normally has trouble connecting with others, she found it easier with Rise because, well, they have similar working personas. Yukari then shares that she's a bit jealous of him as she feels the same way as Fuka, seeming like she doesn't have much importance to the team. Feeling like she's easily replaceable since there are others who are able to do what she does. She then tries to change the subject, but Rise cuts her off before she does by telling her that she shouldn't feel that way, saying that since her team are her friends, then she shouldn't have that thought. Just as Yukari was about to give a response, she stops herself. Rise then tells her to let out what she was gonna say so that she can understand her. Yukari finally shares that because the members of SEES were gathered for a purpose, she doesn't feel like everyone is really friends. This makes Rise share her events that happened in Persona 4 and how she was saved once her group accepted her. Yukari tries to interject, but Rise bashes her on how if she can't even trust her companions, then how is she supposed to save the world? She also tells her how even she can notice how safe they're trying to be with each other and not get into conflict with one another. She goes on to explain how if she really wants to connect with her companions, then what she must do is talk things out, and that way they actually understand each other. There's a bit more that happens, but it's just Yukari realizing that what Rise said is true, and I really do think this is a good character growth scene for Yukari and a nice way of having these characters interact, but I feel like it doesn't surmount to anything in the end. You can probably guess why since it's not really a huge spoiler as to what happens in the end once they leave, but I'll refrain from my explanation until the end. Though the final labyrinth seems a bit anticlimactic from the outside, they still prepare for the worst. Inside, the scenery is something they didn't expect as it takes the look of a festival. So, a festival within a festival. Sort of Inception type shit. Once you start walking a bit forward, your party will immediately see the stairs to the next floor, which they comment on, but obviously with this being the final dungeon, it's not going to be a cakewalk. They also come across a door with a talisman on it, and there's also some words written on it that say to offer the holy flame to it. They try opening it by brute force at first, but when it doesn't open, Rise informs them that although she doesn't see a way to open a door, she does detect a heat source nearby. So before the game explains the puzzle, I'll be the one explaining it to you, dear viewer. For this dungeon, these doors that they've shown you can only be opened by using the holy flame as the writing says, but what is the holy flame? Well, the heat source that Rise brought up are these bonfires. And no, you're not going to be offering up souls to level up your stats. You travel with the heat source with a torch that Zen made with his cape, and you use the torch to burn the talisman, thus opening the door. Though it's not going to be that easy because you only have a certain number of steps before the fire goes out. Now that's part of the puzzle, as when you find one of these doors they need to open with the flame, there won't be a lit bonfire near it. That's where you'll have to find one that is lit and navigate through the labyrinth, finding others that aren't lit to then reach your way to the door. Now, making your way to each bonfire isn't the only obstacle, as there are, of course, the FOEs in your way. For this floor and a bit of the next, the FOE will react to the fire you're carrying, with the first one simply walking away from you the closer you get to it, while the other will chase after you until the fire goes out. So, there's that to look out for. Back to the party, they do find a lit bonfire and assume that it's related to the holy flame. Going with that assumption, Koromaru finds a stick and Zen uses a part of his cape to make a torch. Then bringing the fire to the door, their assumptions are proven right and they're able to progress. Also, at this point you want to leave the dungeon, and I'm sure by this point you can probably guess why. This time, Ray has a Reddit Wholesome 100 request that'll make you give her some Reddit gold. I don't know why I wrote that. That's so fucking dumb. She wants to give Zen a gift and she needs your help, but she gives you a time limit to do so. You absolutely want to do this, as it would unlock another quest that will strengthen Zen and Ray, and I think you need to do this quest as a prerequisite. So again, be sure to do this quest. The gang eventually make it to the stairs and begin to feel it getting hotter as they get closer to the next floor, but it doesn't mean much, so they continue. Once they make it on the second floor, they come across an FOE that they'll be encountering on this floor. This FOE is pretty standard, as when it sees you, it begins to chase you, but for this one, it moves twice as fast. So when you find yourself in its line of sight, you better know the best route towards the exit. Though similar to one of the FOEs on the first floor, if you have the fire with you, then it'll run away the closer you get. Now, although these aren't going to be the main FOEs that you'll encounter on this floor, there is another one that you're going to come across in a room. That being these 4 buff dudes carrying a mikoshi. They're not hard to move around, as they move in a circle pattern and it takes 2 steps for them to actually move 1 space. That is, unless you're carrying the fire, to which then they'll move faster, making it harder to move around them. As the further they get into the labyrinth, the heat is slowly starting to get to them. Akihiko, seeing everyone being bothered by the heat, suggests that they just strip down naked. Okay, maybe not naked, but to just take off their clothes. And this is where Akihiko learns of the word sexual harassment. It really makes you concerned for him. That's when Junpei steps in and saves him from digging himself a bigger hole by making the whole thing a challenge for him to withstand the heat with all his clothes. Akihiko likes the sound of it and drags Shinji into his challenge, to which then they test their limits by standing close to a nearby bonfire. Because of this, Yukari comments on how close they both are and remembers what Rise said, though she stops herself. Junpei agrees, saying that whenever he asks his senpais questions regarding their personas, they just dodge the question, making them feel like they're unreliable to them. Their conversation soon ends, and that's when they remember about Akihiko and Shinji and check up on them, only to see that the heat has gotten into their heads and they soon pass out, meaning that they can continue exploring. Guess that's one way of stopping their disputes. Moving further ahead to the 3rd floor, the puzzles from this point on can get frustrating at times. That's because while we still have to light some bonfires to get around the red talisman doors, now there's some yellow talisman doors that you need to open. Now how do you open these specific doors? Well, there'll be some statues you need to walk through, but in a specific order. It isn't really challenging on this floor as they'll be close to each other, but on the next one, it's on another level. There's also a new FOE on this floor, but it's nothing too complex, as what they do is jump around in a certain pattern. It can get overwhelming as the game will throw 2 of them at you, but once you learn the patterns, it's straightforward from there. Also, having the fire with you changes their behavior. Well, sort of. What happens is that they leave puddles of sweat which become a slippery tile, making you move forward upon stepping on them. Once the sealed doors to the 4th floor stairs are finally opened, the group are beginning to reach their limit as the heat is getting unbearable. Though Mitsuru resists showing any signs of exhaustion and commands everyone to continue, otherwise they should leave. This makes everyone feel comfortable, and seeing that Mitsuru is sure enough exhausted, Yukari speaks up and suggests that they should take a break. Again, she denies being tired, but Yukari finally speaks what's been on her mind the whole time. She shares how they feel emotionally distant towards them, and it makes her feel like they don't even trust her or her fellow underclassmen. All she wants for them is to get to know them better. The others in the P4 gang then begin to worry that a huge fight is about to start, but that's when Yu begins sharing his thoughts about how he wouldn't have been able to do anything without his friends, and that it's because of them that he gets his strength. All of this makes Shinji, Akihiko, and Mitsuru open their eyes and realize that they should have taken the time to actually get to know them and build that trust, especially since they're fighting towards a common goal. Upon this realization, and from this point on, they begin to build a trust with their underclassmen, with first having a party together. This is so wholesome 100. Though, as I've probably mentioned earlier, it doesn't really matter. But Mitsuru does finally share with Yukari on how she acquired her persona abilities, with her being given it to use to protect as a form of duty, and that she only saw herself being the one tasked with this duty. But now she realizes that she isn't alone on this. As everyone finishes having their heart-to-heart, Zen takes notice of everybody's change, and learns that people can change because of the people around them. But he doesn't get to think more about it as they need to continue on. On the 4th floor, they find another door with a yellow talisman nearby, and upon expecting it, the navigators are able to sense a tense atmosphere behind it, which means that the Guardian lies behind it, so we know where our goal is. Now, for this floor, this will be the one where you'll be slightly frustrated, as you'll have to be doing a good amount of backtracking. That's because the statues you walk through are placed on each side of the floor, but you're not given which one you're meant to go through first. Which means that you have to explore the entire floor first, just so you can get the order of which statues to go to. Then you'll have to walk around the entire floor just going in the right order. It's really annoying mainly because it's just time consuming, since the encounter rates are just god-awful. But before you continue, it's time to head back to Elizabeth for some request, as another special one gets unlocked. This time, instead of Elizabeth asking for another fight, it's Margaret this time. You want to fight her, as doing so will let your main personas evolve into their true forms, which lets them learn their special skills. So, you're gonna want to do this. But once going back into the labyrinth and painstakingly going through all the statues, we make it to the final floor, where it has a different atmosphere compared to the rest of the dungeon. More of a dead and spooky scenery instead of the lively festival scenery. The group walks up towards the final chest.
There it is.
Stay away.
Huh?
Appearing before them is a shadow of Ray, who's holding the stuffed rabbit from the first labyrinth. It tells them that they can't have the last item, and everyone in the P3 group is confused as to what's happening. But Yosuke explains that the shadow is a part of Ray that she doesn't want to accept, and that they'll have to face the shadow when it goes berserk. The shadow starts to repeat what could be Ray's inner thoughts of why she was born. Ray begins to get scared and immediately wants to go back to the school. Zen refuses to let her go, and that's when the shadow starts going berserk.
What? Hey! I don't know what's going on, but looks like we gotta step up.
Don't worry, Ray-chan. We deal with stuff like this all the time. Hang in there. We're here with you.
We begin the fight with the fourth boss. Now, this boss isn't so bad, but it is a bit of an endurance. It doesn't have any special attacks that fuck you over or any skills that make it stronger. It simply just has strong attacks that targets an entire row. That, and a skill that has the chance to knock down your party. Though the reason why I say it's an endurance is because when you do kill it, saying that with quotes, it restores all of its HP, meaning that you have to kill it again. Though it only does this once, and because it restores all of its HP, it doesn't have that much to begin with. So this boss isn't all too difficult, and you'll have no problem defeating it.
Good. Let's keep this up.
Ray-chan, could that girl be another part of you? There are different sides to people. Everyone has some things about them that they don't want to face or admit. If it's all right with you, will you talk to us? Can't we share in whatever burden it is you're carrying?
I don't know. That thing's... it's not me! Ray-san. Wait!
What is it?
The thing that Zen pulls out is a card that says, "Please rest in peace" for someone named Nico. Zen then shares with everybody that he finally remembers everything, with the first thing he reveals being his real name, Kronos, the god of time, and that he came to take Rei away. She continues to deny the truth to everything, but Zen knows that she was scared of the Labyrinths because of her memories that lie within them. But the reason why she decided to explore them was so she wouldn't be alone and for the slightest chance to be able to go to the real world. Knowing that she can't leave this world, he tells her that he'll take her with him and that he'll restore her memories.
Ray, I'm sorry.
What was I?
Your time has come. Come with me, Ray.
No.
Hey, what's all this stuff about coming and going? I mean, you're upsetting her.
Ray is...
Don't.
Ray cannot stay here. In fact, she can't stay anywhere. The truth is, Ray is dead.
No!
Ray!
Ray-san!
They follow her outside of the clock tower, but everyone is confused about what Zen said. He goes on to explain that the world they're in is a place where the dead end up, and that he comes for them to send them off. Rei continues to keep denying what Zen says, but she knows full well the truth. She goes on to say that she's scared, not of death, but that she feels like her life was meaningless.
Why was I born? My whole life was suffering and envy. I couldn't even go to school. It would be fine if there was any meaning to all that, if there was a point. I'd be okay with it, but if there was no point, I can't accept it. For me to die like that, then this is the end. I haven't even done anything. I haven't found anything. What would you know? You're still alive!
A shadow.
Ray-san! I'm sorry. No. No!
With the form of the clock tower changing, Zen is confused and assumes that the shadows have gone mad, trying to keep Rei away from him, as if she leaves, then the world they're in disappears. Chie and the rest get confused as they thought that Rei created it, but Zen now clarifies that he finally remembers that he was the one who created the school. With everyone still being confused and wanting to know of a way to save her, they ask Zen to tell them the full truth. Zen obliges and shares that he is death and that he was to take Rei to the afterlife. We then get shown a flashback to when Kronos first met Rei. He's shown introducing himself to her and tells her that she's dead, though she doesn't say anything and only repeats the fact that she's dead. She then remains silent while Kronos is confused as to why she isn't saying anything or even expressing any emotion when learning the fact that she's dead. Cutting back to Zen, he explains that he now realizes that she was in despair, but his past self took an interest in her and did all he can to make her talk as a means to kill time. It cuts back to Kronos where he creates the school out of Rei's memories, and because of this, she finally starts talking. She talks about how she was supposed to go to Yasogami High, but due to her sickness, she couldn't. She also shares the dreams she wanted to make while going to Yasogami. She then goes on to show Kronos her treasures, the ones we found throughout the labyrinths. The first being the stuffed rabbit that was given to her and the clothes made by a nurse. The second being a toy ring that was given by her mother, who told her that she would have a nice wedding. Though after that, her mom left her after telling Rei that she didn't want her. She finally shares her real name, Nico, like the one in the letter and the rabbit. Earlier, the party assumed it to mean smile or to smile, but in reality, she's named Nico because she's the second child. The third item, the hair, was actually her hair before she had to get it shaved off. She was angry at the nurses for giving it to her, but even then, she kept it. Kronos points out the last item that Nico didn't know about. Reading it, she realizes that it's from an older girl who stayed next to her named Yuki. Nico confided in her as Yuki would cheer her up whenever she was sad. Yuki would eventually recover and send motivational letters to her, but in the end, she doesn't make it.
Thought I did my best, but I wonder if I had to try harder. In peace. That's so cruel. When she's still alive, I bet she's laughing, happy to be alive. It's not fair! Why only me? Why was I born? Why did I have to be born? I have nothing. No friends, no parents, not even my health. I prayed to God every day, and not one prayer was granted. Why did I exist? What was the point of my life? Thank you, Mr. Death, for showing me this place, but I didn't want to see it. Everyone else gets to come here every day, but I'm gonna die alone. This is too cruel. That's enough. I've had enough. Hurry up and kill me. Take me away right now. I don't want to say this anymore.
Zen then shares that she breaks down and even tries to gouge out her eyes, but in a desperate measure, to get her to stop, he erases her memories. It shows back to Kronos and Nico, but this time it's her without her memories. Not knowing her name, Kronos at first wants to name her Nico, but not wanting her to be associated with that name anymore, he tries to think of another name. She notices that Kronos is trembling and comforts him by assuring that he isn't alone. He reintroduces himself not as Kronos but as Zen instead, which he explains means one who lives with you, though she instead prefers to call him Zen instead as it's easier to write, but also because it means nice. Kronos then decides to name her Philae, but she isn't able to pronounce it, so she goes with Rei instead. Back to Zen, he shares that he doesn't know why he cried, but says if he did have a heart, then he would have wanted to tear it out. He regretted making the school for Rei, as it was the cruelest thing he could have done, showing a dead person the life they couldn't have anymore. But not only that, but to erase her memories as well. Even though he's meant to take her away, he still wanted to give her an answer for why she existed. So, for that reason, he didn't send her off. He goes on to explain that he took his other half and put it in the clock tower and their memories in the rooms that eventually became the Labyrinths. He also comes with an explanation with one of Ray's quirks, that being her constant eating, concluding that she must have done so because she wanted to live. He then tells everyone to leave as the world is unstable and that he'll disappear along with Ray, but he'll do what he can to save her. Though, everyone rejects Zen's plan and instead decides to tag along with him to save Ray. So, with their determination in hand, they plan to face the true final labyrinth, the clock tower, and save Ray.
All the locks have been released, and the doors are open. You may now return to the worlds from which you originally came. This door leads to my guest's world.
And this door, in turn, should lead to my guests.
After telling the Velvet Room attendants that we're planning to save Ray first, Margaret pulls us aside to speak with us. She goes into detail that although Zen is death, he isn't actually the god Kronos. Instead, he was created through the minds of people. She also finally realizes why the setting is a culture festival, as it was meant as a way to put Ray at ease, as festivals were meant to put souls to rest. With her explanation over, we could finally head to the clock tower, the final labyrinth. Now, for this dungeon, this will be the longest of them all. Well, at least in terms of having the most floors out of them all. And although it has 10 floors, floors 1 through 7 are quite small, while the last 2 are as large as any of the typical floors from the last 2 labyrinths. So realistically, the length through this one is on par or even perhaps shorter than the other labyrinths. Now, for the first Stafui that you'll encounter are the yellow spiders. They jump in a pattern and their jumps are pretty long, so you want to know the distance they can travel and the path they go before trying to navigate around them. Also, when you're able to, you want to kill them as they hold a material that's needed to make everyone's ultimate armor. The other materials I'll have you look into, but I thought I should give you this one. Though, I should warn you that this enemy has the skill Mamudun, and it'll use it immediately when you fight it. So, if you don't have anyone who can block it or have any vanishing balls, then you'll be screwed. Getting a little ways through the first floor, the party begins to hear Ray's voice. She apologizes to them all for making this world, and after saying that, her voice disappears. Remembering Ray's internal question of her life's meaning, Zen thought that there isn't or shouldn't be a reason for someone to live. That is until he met Ray, and now he doesn't know. This is where everyone gives their own explanation for their reasons for living. Akihiko shares that he lives because everyone that he met made who he is, and because of that, he wants to be surrounded by people. I think of this as a sort of nice scene for them to have with each other. And this scene sort of parallels with the themes of Persona 3. Moving on from that though, on the second floor we meet with a new FOE that should be familiar to those who've played any of the recent Persona games, that being the Reaper. Now, I've seen people complain about the use of the Reaper in new Persona games, saying that his meaning has been lost since they use him constantly. Sort of akin to Pyramid Head, how he's meant to symbolically represent the main character's trauma, but due to their popularity, Konami puts them wherever they can. Whether or not you feel the same way about the Reaper, I think it sort of works in this instance since Zen and Kronos is supposed to be death, and the world they're in is sort of like the afterlife. Because of that, I think it works to a certain degree, but you of course can make your own opinions on that. But what I do know is that this fucker is a pain in the ass, as when you're in the room with him, he'll constantly pursue you to the ends of the earth. So when you're in those rooms, they're sort of like a puzzle where you need to navigate around them. Zen also comments on the Reaper, but goes on to explain that because he split his power and kept Ray's soul alive, then a doomsday for that world would eventually come. When that time comes, then his other half would take them and the world would disappear, but if they're still in the world while it gets destroyed, then everyone's existence will be erased. He further explains that his other half must have taken Rei so that he and Cronus would become one again, and that he also brought our party together so that he'd get his memories back. If you remember in the beginning, there was a subtle line about our party seeing a spider. Well, that spider was meant to be Chronos' minion. Even though everyone is given this warning, they've already made a promise to Zen, and that's to save Rei. So they continue on. Once they make it to the 5th floor and finding a place to relax, Yukari and Junpei talk to Makoto. They talk about how nice it is that Mitsuru and the others are now more open towards them. Yukari even mentioning that because of all the personal things she's been dealing with, it sort of got projected onto her senpais and she was just judging them based on that. But overall, she's glad she was able to open up her thoughts with everyone and that things turn out good in the end. And they continue on after that conversation. I'm now going to skip a few floors here since they're not all too important and talk about the final 2 floors that you need to navigate through. These final 2 floors are the longest in this dungeon and they're somewhat tedious to go through. The reason for that is because you'll be having to go back and forth between both floors just so you can make progress. What I mean is that at some points you'll be blocked by these pistons that were introduced in the previous floor. The only way to get through it is to find the stairs to either level and raise or lower the pistons just so you can continue on that path. The game also teases you at some point the final staircase to the final boss, but you still have to keep going up and down. I wouldn't say that the design is that bad, but having to do tedious work just to get around a closed path, it just gets to you, and especially when the other 7 floors were shorter. These floors also introduce the last FOE you'll encounter, and it's these gray spiders. Their thing is that they have webs covering the room, and whenever you step on its web, then it'll jump in 4 directions that'll be the fastest to get to you. So as you're able to guess what you're to do, to get around them is to try to find the web that's the furthest away from the exit and bait the spider to it. But once all the back and forth and traversing is done, the end is finally near once you go past those steps. Though before you actually go up to the final set of stairs to the final boss, Zen is a bit hesitant and afraid that he doesn't have the answer for Rei. But after reassuring him that he should just be honest with his feelings, Zen then finds his answer to what living means. That answer being to change is to live. Witnessing the changes that happened between the P3 gang, he found his meaning, and that because Rei was able to live, that itself is her meaning in life. He then thanks us for not only helping him find his answer in the meaning of life, but for also helping him find the answer to save Rei. With that, when interacting the stairs, we're given the final warning prompt to finish anything that's not been finished yet. And while there are some things that I haven't talked about that are able to be done, for now, I'll walk up these stairs and save Rei.
There it is.
I'm getting a strong reading. It's powerful, so be careful.
Rei-chan is inside that shadow.
Hey, Rei-chan!
Rei-san, please answer us.
Wake up!
It's no use. Rei-chan's reading is still weak.
Then we have to hurry and defeat it. Enough talk. Come at us!
Rei will save you. Not with my power alone, but with everyone's. Through all of our strengths combined, we'll save you!
Now we face the Captor Spider, who isn't much of a tough boss, but one that does a good amount of stalling. For the first few turns, it'll act like any normal boss fight, but after that, that's where its stalling comes into play. So it puts up these 4 shields which are all weak to a specific element, which shouldn't be hard to figure out what each weaknesses are. Once you do take him out though, that's when the spider is vulnerable to attacks for a few turns, but that's only if you're able to take out all of the shields in a short amount of time. Otherwise, if you take a bit of time to take him out, or not all of them at once, then you're left with attacking the main spider for 1 or 2 turns. Which isn't enough time if you're trying to set up some high damaging attacks like I tried doing. Other than that though, while the spider does have his shield up, then each shield does take a turn to deal damage to you, and it can get a bit overwhelming, but if you set up your attacks right and hit their weaknesses, then you'll be able to manage. So then with that, you should be done with this boss.
Ray! Ray, are you all right?
Zen? Thank goodness. Are you okay? Can you walk?
No.
You can't? Here, take my hand.
Run. Please. Run.
Huh? Be careful! Something's coming!
It's been a while. I am Kronos, creator and giver of time. The time to reap the seeds I have sown has come. This is the personification of my power as Kronos, an unfeeling god that only obeys its duty and reaps what time is left. This was me before I met Ray. It will be powerful. Tremendously so.
We have no intention of backing down after coming this far.
Sorry, but I don't pray to no gods.
The phrase, giving up, is not in my internal dictionary.
Hate to break it to you, dude, but we've got power too.
This'll be a breeze for us.
Yeah, I'll never back down. I'll fight, for everyone's sake.
Me too. I'm here because everyone else is with me. That's why I'm gonna fight.
Everyone. Companions. I'm weak, but that weakness has taught me much. That I've been running away. That it's my companions who support me, the feelings I believe in, and what I wish to protect. Our enemy now is the me that used to run away. I will defeat myself.
You, who were once part of me, return to me. Otherwise, you shall return to the embrace of eternity.
It's coming! Please, save Rayjon!
Philae, forgive me, for I was not able to save you back then. And forgive me for saving you now.
Let's go!
That's right, the spider wasn't the actual boss, because of course it isn't. The real boss is Zen's other half, Kronos. Now, this boss can be the hardest in the entire game if you're not fully prepared to handle it. Immediately when the first turn is over, Kronos will activate his most annoying skill, Gears of Time. When he uses this, you'll immediately see red scary numbers appear on your party. What the red numbers indicate are the turns until that character will die. Yup, you're essentially on a time limit for this fight. Now, this is what I meant you're fucked if you're unprepared, because this can screw you over. In my original playthrough, this skill caused me to have to retry this fight over maybe 5 times because I did not understand how to get around it. That, or I think I was just dumb at planning things, but I was stupid because the game literally tells you how to get around it. So let me tell you what you should do and what 13 or 14-year-old me couldn't figure out the first time. So if you simply use revive items or Samaric harm on a character, then their countdown goes up by 1, letting their inevitable last longer. Though you can do this, using revives on your allies isn't the way to get through this fight, as you'll eventually run out of items. You're meant to let them die, but using the revives, you're meant to make it easier on yourself by choosing the death order to manage things. So like, let your healer last a turn or two longer so that they can revive the other party members, or use them to heal everyone. Something like that. But Gears of Time isn't the only skill he has to screw you over with, as he has another skill called Time Reversal, which lets him reverse time and get his HP back. Yeah, it's pretty bullshit. But that's not all, as he has another skill called Time Warp, which hastens the countdown to your death. Oh, and he also has a skill to just stop time and hit you for 4 turns. This final boss will do anything to just ruin your day, especially if you're just ill-prepared. Otherwise though, if you did manage to prepare everything that he would throw at you, then this fight is manageable and straightforward. Sure, his unique skills might all be bullshit, but if you just have the right skills, play right, and have plenty of items, then this fight will not be that tough. And sure enough, you'll be able to defeat him, and finally save Ray.
I am Kronos. I was born from man, the common man of his journey. You wander in the venom of dream. Your transcendence forged you uncompromising power. What is your life? What is your death?
We've changed too. Zen-kun, Ray-chan, everyone from Yasogami High, they've all become precious to us. That's right. That's why we're here. Ray-chan and Zen-kun are one of us. The people I met in this world have destroyed my weaknesses and doubts. They set me on the right track.
The connections we make give us strength, and we've forged new bonds in this strange world.
I realized something on my way here. I want to fight to keep my friends smiling, to protect their dreams.
Kronos, do you understand what you were lacking? I didn't have it until now either. The power in a fleeting life. The beauty it holds. Do you see it? They have taught me much. And so, I am here to defeat you and negate myself. I will save Ray. That is the duty I have undertaken, of my own will.
He's almost down. Keep it up.
I'll show you what it means to live. I'm sorry. Your duties have come to an end. You must return from whence you came.
The time has come.
Ray.
What have I done?
I'm sorry. I've caused so much trouble. I'm already dead.
Ray.
I shouldn't exist. Things would have been better if I was never born. Everyone got to go to school and had families. But I died all alone. Why was I born? All I had in life was suffering and jealousy. What reason was there for me to be born?
Ray-chan.
Ray, you don't need a reason for your life. No one has such a reason. You existed. You lived. That's all that matters. There is only one of you, since man was born, and forevermore afterward. The girl before me now will be the only Ray in existence. You are no one else. Everything you do, only you could have done.
But I...
Didn't the people around you change a bit because you were there? In your life, there were those who found joy and sorrow in your words. I'm certain that you changed someone in that way. You gave someone life, and I'm certain that they changed you in turn. Your mother, nurses, friends, whether you intended it or not, they were changed. They gave you life. Even if you disappear, the world you were from goes on, but that world is the one you lived in. Even if only a little, it changed because you lived in it. You were there as a small cog in that world. A person's life isn't defined by grand accomplishments. You lived. Does that itself not give meaning to your life?
I lived. Did I live?
I didn't know you when you were alive, but I can tell by watching you now that you lived to the last.
Thank you. I think I just wanted someone to say that to me.
You did live, Ray.
Thank you.
To think that all you wished for was to hear these words. I made you suffer for so long. I'm so sorry.
Zen, I'm happy. I lived my life. I lived it to the fullest. Thank you for waiting for me, Zen. I'll go with you.
Yes.
Oh, the sky.
With Kronos defeated, the sky finally returns to its blue self, and everyone celebrates their victory. They all go back inside the school, but instead of saying their farewells, they decide to go through the labyrinths again to have some fun. Now that the shadows are gone after all. After that though, it's finally time for them to say their farewells. Though Margaret tells them that once they return to their worlds, then they'll all lose their memories of this place. Although that may be the case, they all are sure that the feelings they felt will remain in their hearts, and that one day, they'll for sure meet again. Which I guess is true for 2 spin-offs. They go into the Velvet Room and Ray says her farewell, but asks Makoto for the journal where we drew the maps. She cries as the maps have a special place in her heart, as the labyrinths are a symbolic representation of her memories.
I will now take Ray and depart to eternity.
Eternity?
Where all life is born and returns to. I too will return there, along with Ray. I'm no longer the Kronos that people desired and gave birth to, you see.
Zen?
Ray, just as you lived, so did I live with you here. You gave me life. Did I live the best I could?
Mm-hmm.
Let's go. Philae.
Philae. That's the name you gave me then.
It's your name. It means love.
Zen!
This is so mushy.
Jeez, Teddy. This is the good part.
But I can't believe we can't ever see them again.
I had a lot of fun. Thank you so much. Thank you.
This really is goodbye then.
Rei-san, Zen-san, farewell.
Bye-bye.
They're really gone.
It is time for us to go as well.
So long, guys.
Hey, thanks.
Thank you so much.
Well, see ya.
For now, please excuse us.
I'll score with you next time, ladies.
Thanks for everything.
We'll meet again soon.
See you again. For sure. Yeah, see you soon.
Thank you. It was fun.
We gotta chat again sometime. Let's meet again for sure, okay? This is not goodbye for us.
Well then, until next time.
I'm proud to have met you all, and to have fought alongside you, as companions. We'll meet again, someday.
It seems that the chain of events here has reached its conclusion. Wherever there are beginnings, there are ends. That is the providence of the world. These ends come so that new beginnings may be born. Till the cycle returns to where it started. Well then, until we meet again.
And that's Persona Q, Shadows of the Labyrinths. Now once you complete the game, you get access to the New Game Plus feature. Your save file will also have whichever side you chose say complete on it, and on the start screen you'll see raised flowers on the New Game option. When you start New Game Plus, you of course get to keep all your items, and not only that, but the map you drew also carries over, so you don't have to painstakingly redraw it again. Since I've played both sides of the game's story now, there isn't much reason for me to replay the game, but for you, you can experience the other side of the game and see all the subtle differences of the story. But if you do manage to complete both sides, then in the credits, you'll get rewarded with a special picture. Now, for the game itself, I did enjoy replaying this game for the most part, though that might be a bit of nostalgia talking. But man, this game can be a bit too much to get through. I wouldn't say it's a bad game overall. I personally think it does a fine job at mixing the gameplay and aspects of both series respectfully. But when it comes to having to navigate through the labyrinths and just the overall annoyance when it comes to the encounter rate, it can get a bit tiring. Though there are items to help deal with that, it entirely depends if you found the proper material to craft the item for it to then be available. But even then, I don't like the aspect of having to gather materials to craft items, because then it could just become a grind fest, just looking for that one material to craft that one item to help make a problem be more bearable. Like, for equipment, I understand grinding for materials, but don't do it for the items, it's just awful. And speaking of materials, I don't like the fact that you have a carry limit in this game. Like, I get it, it's a way to make you go back and sell those materials to get better items and for you to also save and replenish your health, but I just don't like it. If there really has to be a carry limit, then they should have separated the items and the materials and given them their own carry limits. Whoever decided that carry limits in games was a good idea, it's fucking stupid. They're a bane in everyone's existence. The only time they feel appropriate to be used is in survival horror games. Other than crafting materials and items, another complaint I have is the neglect of XP being shared across everyone. Like, the main party is fine, but I don't like how you're pretty much not able to experiment with other party members as they don't get any XP. I mean, yes, there are accessories you can craft that you can give to characters on the side to get XP, but you get those late in the game. At that point, you've already spent so much time with the party you formed and probably found a good setup with them that you probably don't even want to switch them out. I really wish they would have thought this out, especially since you have access to a large cast, and it would have just made experimenting fun. Now, as for the side quest, I did say there are a few more that you can do, but didn't mention, so let me bring that up now. In this playthrough, I didn't manage to quite complete all the requests, but if you do, then you have access to the final Elizabeth fight, which unlocks Zeus for you. And then once everything is completed, you have access to the secret boss, that being the Velvet Room attendant. Yes, just like the other Persona games, you get to fight Elizabeth, Margaret, and Theodore. Can't say as to how strong they are since I didn't fight them, but I'm sure they're harder to deal with than the final boss. Okay, now for my overall thoughts for the game's story, and I'd say I like it for the most part. I do enjoy the chemistry for all the characters' interaction with each other. I also like how all the characters were utilized and had a good amount of screen time even with such a big cast. Kinda puts Haru's screen time to shame in vanilla P5. As for the new characters, Zen and Rei, I too like their inclusion and I kinda like them as characters. I mean, sure, they have the trope of losing their memories, but I still like their chemistry together. With even the build up to regaining their memories and them having a huge connection with the school and Rei's plot twist, I overall thought it was good. And I do think the game does a good enough job at keeping that twist, but also sort of subtly giving that hint. I just think everything on that side was done pretty well. Though one part I would have to say that even though I liked, it sort of had little meaning to it, that being the B plot of the P3 side with them trying to be closer with each other. Everything for the most part I liked, how Yukari has that feeling of not feeling too important in C's, as though she's expendable since their senpais aren't close or even open to them. Didn't Ri say that makes Yukari realize that she needs to open up her feelings to them so that they understand how she feels and then they could all understand each other? Everything about that I personally liked, but it's towards the end where because they'll lose their memories, it sort of makes the whole thing feel like it has no meaning at all in the end. I mean, yeah, they sort of relegate that by saying that even if their memories are gone, they will still feel the emotions they felt, but I don't know, that sort of feels like a cop-out to me in a weird way. But I don't know, I'll let you be the judge of that. For as much as I like it, it still feels like it didn't really matter in the end. Other than that though, I pretty much enjoyed everything else for the most part. I know drawing the map can be a bit iffy for some people, but I personally kinda like it. Though turning on the auto map can help to a certain degree. I like the inclusion of sub-personas as it gave your other party members other options to what they would normally have, even though adding it caused everyone's main personas to have very limited skills. The strolls were a nice substitution to social links as you get to see more of the other characters interact with each other. Although the game might have a few flaws in some certain aspects, I do think that this game is worth trying if you're into the Persona series. It's just a fun, fanservice-y game all around with a nice story to it. Plus, watching this video only gives you one side of the story as, again, there's the P4 side to experience for yourself. So again, I'd say give it a shot, and you'll probably see what makes this game enjoyable. Plus, if you did end up enjoying it, there's always a sequel there waiting. Overall, I really did enjoy my time replaying this game, even though there were some bad parts here and there to it. But again, I would definitely recommend this to people who are into the Persona series. And so with that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.
Jeez, is our leader still not back?
Come on, not even a bite?
Welcome home. Ah, there you are.
You're late, dude!
Come on, sit down. Time to get this started.
Say, why are we having this party again?
You remember. What was it for?
You know, this isn't bad.
Okay, everyone. Please take your seats for dinner.
Hey, I'm home.
Looks like we're
Hey, where you been, man?
We can't get things started without you.
Come on, hurry and take your seat.
Sorry.